economic stability, transportation, and other services, along with community contexts like community cohesion and civic participation, and also interaction with the criminal justice system. So our access to these, to social determinants of health are also governed by a lot of systems of power, like structural racism and sexism and ableism and poverty. So our team at Kresge is really focused on building equity-focused systems of health that can create opportunities for everyone to be as healthy as they can be. I think what's key to our work is that we try to champion solutions that are led by communities and by supporting community leadership and advocacy to address the structural conditions, excuse me, that impact health. And we're absolutely committed to addressing racial and health equity in our work, and we recognize the challenges that communities are facing in addressing these issues as well. So we also know that communities, we start from the place that communities have the expertise and experience to design solutions that change systems that work for their communities. So we know that the most effective approaches are informed by and led by those communities most affected. So we try to engage those who are closest to the issues, but those who are often excluded from decision-making, so we can create opportunities for, so we can help create opportunities for all people. I will say that we, the health program has really we focus on 3 areas of work: community-driven solutions, community health ecosystems, and community investments for health equity. Now, you could certainly read more, obviously, and learn more from us, or read more on the website about these. But I'll just tell you briefly, in our community health ecosystems area of work, we're really trying to increase access to programs and services and systems of care that are equitable. And in this area of our work, we think about health workforce and systems integration, some trauma and safety work as well. And in our community investments for health equity, we're really trying to help communities access resources that may be in their communities. And this is work is really designed to close the racial wealth gap. So we look at issues of, enterprise issues, food systems, housing, and infrastructure. I'll focus a little bit more, though, on our community-driven solutions area of work, because in this area, this is where we support community leadership to address specific social determinants of that, and structural conditions that impact health. So in this area of our work is our climate resilience, our food systems, our housing, and trauma and safety as well. I know I've said this probably 4 times already, but we do prioritize community in all of our strategies. And we also have a broad definition of what community is. So in our community health ecosystems, we're looking at community and institutions, and in our community investment for health equity, we're looking at community and capital. But all of these really look at community has historically disinvested geographic neighborhoods in cities and areas where communities of color led businesses have systematically been denied economic opportunity. So that's how we think about the work overall. Let me just give you 2 quick examples of our work to maybe illustrate a little bit more our work in community-driven solutions. So we do a lot of work in food justice and food systems in this area of work, but our investment in community-led food enterprises is done as a way to stabilize neighborhoods, particularly those in transition and those facing displacement, because we know that oftentimes conventional food systems, and honestly, some of which we've supported in the past, have contributed to displacement and extraction of local services. So in contrast, the food system work that we support is completely led by community practitioners and is focused on building food and agriculture enterprises in low wealth communities, which helps to drive community development. And just a second quick example is our housing work. We're working to advance health equity through housing. We're supporting 31 organizations around the country to address the lack of affordable housing in their communities. So In terms of our grant making, we use a full array of funding and investment tools, including project grants, operating support, planning grants, program-related investments occasionally that take the form of direct loans and guarantees. So we also go through requests for proposal processes. We invite proposals from organizations for specific area of funding, and we invite communities to help us design some more grant making efforts. So please, I hope this gives you, I know that's a very quick overview of the work, but please feel free to connect with us, and we are happy to talk more with you about it if you have any more questions. So I will thank you all. I will turn it over to Bill Moses.
Thanks, Stacy. My name is Bill Moses. I'm greetings from Chicago, where I'm attending the Achieving the Dream Conference on Community College Student Success. I use the pronouns he, him, and serve as the managing director of Kresge's education team, where I oversee the full range of our activities from planning and strategy development to grant making. I'm a white male with gray hair, glasses, and a brown beard, and I'm wearing a white shirt with a blue tie. I have about 7 slides to share with you today and am the parent of a person with a neurological disability. Can we go to slide 2, please? So the Kresge Foundation team works to increase post-secondary access and success for low-income, first-generation underrepresented students while reducing inequitable student outcomes in the United States and South Africa. Specifically, we focus on first-generation, low-income, African-American, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Native American students. We work across the United States, but have 4 focus states where we do more investment: California, Florida, Michigan, and Texas. And of course, we work in the Kresge Foundation focus cities of Detroit, New Orleans, Memphis, and Fresno. Slide 3, please. It's very difficult to live a middle-class life today without a post-secondary credential. Securing a post-secondary credential, whether it's a certificate, associate degree, or BA degree, bestows huge advantages to individuals in terms of income and quality of life and opportunities. But it also strengthens a community or a nation when its residents have high educational attainment. As Stacy said, often if you have higher educational attainment, you're more likely to live a healthier life. The challenge, unfortunately, is that not everyone has opportunities to attend college at an affordable price, and not everyone who manages to enroll in a college manages to actually graduate. We go to slide 4, please. So we have 3 main focus areas. The first is we have a college access strategy, Pathways to College, and that really is designed to help 18-year-olds transition to college, and adults or older adults who often have had some prior college experience return to college. The second strategy is we have an institutional capacity building strategy focused on community colleges, minority serving institutions, and historically Black colleges and public institutions. This is where the vast majority of Americans attend college and where the vast majority of the students we focus on attend college. And the idea here is to help those institutions live up to their missions, to ensure that they're operating at the best level in terms of management, use of big data, student success, resource development, all the ways in which we can make those institutions as strong as possible when they serve students that we care about. Third, we seek to align and strengthen urban higher education ecosystems. And this is a concept that we developed because most people go to college within about an hour or so of home. And so the idea is, how do we help a city, a community, support a student's success? When a student goes off to college at a public flagship or across the country at a college, everything is pretty much taken care of. They have housing, they have food, they have career planning, of course they have academics, they have social life. They have a whole bunch of things all handled there. They don't need transit because they live on campus in many cases. But that's not true for the students who are coming to college from across town. And so let's go to slide 5. This slide sort of illustrates what we see as this well-functioning post-secondary higher access and success ecosystem. So we have the student in the center, and then we try to get community colleges, four-year institutions, government, social service nonprofits, philanthropy, business, education nonprofits, transit, like the K-12 system, all working together to see if they can't support students so that the students don't sort of pop out at the end of their senior year with no real support, but that there's actually a lattice work, a network of institutions support those students do better. Can we go to slide 6, please? So one of the questions, and I have to apologize, I've just gotten a message that my internet is unstable here in Chicago. But some of the thoughts, just so you know how we do applications, we make individual grants, and we also do broader initiatives that we support through RFPs, requests for proposals. We rarely fund individual higher education institutions. We prefer to fund systemic change and networks of organizations. And we typically ask 5 questions. Does this proposal, this LOI, fit our strategy? Does it address racial and structural inequities? Is it sustainable? Can it be scaled? And does it have significant impact? That's pretty much how we engage with our potential grantees. I'd like to pass it on to slide 7, and then also turn the microphone over to Gina. Thank you.
And I'm going to let Gina share her screen, and really quickly, I know earlier I said folks can put their questions in the chat, but the chat was not enabled for everybody. It should be enabled for everybody now. So feel free to put those questions in.
Well, thank you, Bill and Georgia. I'm Gina Lewis, and I'm a senior fellow at the Human Services, or Kresge Foundation in the Human Services Program. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm coming to you all from my home office, which the walls are gray. I think there's 2 bookshelves behind me, as well as a framed certificate diploma. So I'm an African-American woman, and I have brown, well, depending on the day, I have dark brown and light brown hair. And today I'm wearing a blue blouse with circle print on it. I'm well into my 50s, but I think I present much younger, so you can use that for what it's worth. One thing I want to say to you all, prior to my work at Kresge, I worked primarily in the public sector for several years and with the Tennessee Department of Human Services. And that department was responsible for administrating the VR service program and disability services. Also of note, my son Tyler, who is now 21, lost his vision when he was 8 as a result of a brain tumor. So again, he's now 21 and uses a 64-inch cane. So that lets you know that he's very, very, very tall. And I do have a special appreciation for the work of your organizations. So again, I'm glad to be a part of this introductory dialogue, and I will provide a high-level overview of Human Services Program here at Kresge Foundation. So about Human Services, we center racial equity and racial justice to advance multi-generational family, social, and economic success, which includes social and economic mobility. We define social and economic mobility as the movement of families between social strata and their ability to improve their wealth and economic status. This includes a person's autonomy, power, and ability to influence his or her own environment and personal outcomes. We adhere to a person-centered approach, which is strengths-based and grounded in the belief that people are resilient and inherently capable and operate within self-agency. Core to our strategy is a 2-generation approach. This approach was developed by Ascend at the Aspen Institute, which is also one of our partners. The idea is really quite simple and makes a lot of sense, but the family's well-being requires working with children and adults in their lives simultaneously. The Human Services Program strategy has 3 primary focus areas. And I think we've all said that same sentence between health and education. So we do have 3 focus areas, and all of them work together in furtherance of multi-generational social and economic success. Our first is our Next Gen initiatives, and we entitle that Fostering the Next Generation of Nonprofit and Public Human Services Organization. And this refers to our focus on supporting organizations who are committed to and aligned with our primary strategies of social and economic success that center racial equity and racial justice. The second focus area is what we call place-based opportunity ecosystems. This involves supporting cross-sector and system efforts to improve how systems work to advance family, social, and economic success, again, centering racial equity and racial justice. The third human services focus area is supportive public policy and field building. Essentially, we look at the lessons learned through the other two focus areas to advance policy solutions and build the human services field. As I've said before, core to our strategy is the two-generation approach. This slide is a graphic. Again, this was created by Ascend at the Aspen Institute, and it sort of exemplifies the two-generation approach. On the left side of the slide is a young girl, and the center is a picture of a mother, a father, and two young boys. And on the right side of the graphic is an adult man walking with a young boy, I say about 10, with his arm on his shoulder. The graphic is meant to represent the continuum of how human service organizations can be child-focused with parent elements on one end, or parent-focused and parent-focused with child elements on the other end. And what we seek to do is to serve the whole family, which is in the center. Additionally, we look for, and I think a couple of other program areas said this as well, as we look for system and policy changes. That is primarily what we want to focus on. And this is another graphic that sort of exemplifies and shows the work that we do and who we support. At the bottom of the slide, there are C's that represent family voice, plus data and research and evidence, plus best and promising practice that create a sprouting plant representing policies for children and families. And then once watered or supported, these policies grow into policy and system changes for children and families. We look for policy and field building efforts that include 5 principles that are again embedded in the two-generation programs strategies. And that are programs and organizations that measure and account for outcomes for both children and their parents or the adults in their lives. 2, to engage and listen to the voice of families. 3, ensure equity, particularly racial equity. 4, foster innovation and evidence together. And 5, align and link with systems and funding streams. I do want to point out a couple of things that I think are pretty, or can be very much aligned with disability services and human services. I wanted to point out that people with a disability are twice as likely to live in poverty. And furthermore, people of color with a disability face an even greater economic hardship, which compound both the effects of structural and cultural barriers. In 2020, the Century Foundation put out statistics that said 1 in 4 disabled Black adults in the United States lived in poverty, while just over 1 in 7 of their white counterparts did so. And then when we talk about the whole family, again, when a family member has a disability, what we know for sure is that the entire family is impacted. I wanted to highlight a couple of efforts that we have currently going on in the Human Services Program. As you know, WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, is federal legislation that is designed to strengthen and improve the workforce system and help people who face significant barriers to employment get jobs and careers. A key component of WIOA also helps to strengthen the VR program. The foundation of the VR program is the principle that individuals with disabilities can achieve high quality, competitive, integrative employment when provided with necessary services and support. The Human Services Program is currently convening a cohort of state workforce leaders to identify and address the institutional and structural barriers of racism within the WIOA. This short-term cohort will examine and deconstruct the core components of WIOA, equip practitioners with the skills and the tools to identify and address racism in public policy, and also develop advocacy and policy recommendations to directly inform and in response to the executive order on equity and inclusion that was signed when President Biden took office. Speaking of that executive order, there is a national convening that's happening in March. And the name of it is National Convening of Building an Inclusive Human Services System. Again, it's a result of the president's executive order, and it's being sponsored by ACF, or the Administration for Children and Families. And it will be held in DC, I believe it is. the idea, again, is to make human services more inclusive for underserved communities and for anyone who has been heretofore left out of full participation. So before they held the conference, or before they're holding the conference, they also did listening sessions with all people in all places, those some with disabilities, and they are also highlighting a couple of sessions with regard to disabilities on accessibility, building professional capacity in the field to serve persons with disabilities, and ADA session for human service providers. So our human services team is supporting this effort, and we have been partnering with ACF in the lead up to this, and will be in attendance and participants. Although we do not directly support service providers, we partner with and support organizations that provide services to those with disabilities. I've highlighted a few here: Metro Action Commission in Nashville, APHSA, which is a national organization, Springboard to Opportunities, they're in Jackson, Mississippi, Social Current, who have an estimated 92 accredited organizations who are focused on achieving housing, employment, and economic self-sufficiency goals for individuals with disability. And I've mentioned Ascend as a partner several times throughout, but they support organizations who support families with a member with a disability. And they have a couple of organizations, CRAN Center, which is in Ireland, Center for Excellence in Disability at West Virginia University, and Changing Maryland for the Better. So funding opportunities, like I think Stacy said, we use similar tools as far as project grants, operating support, planning grants, and program-related investments. We usually proactively invite or solicit applications from individual organizations. Sometimes we use a competitive process if we have an effort that is open in that way. And then we also use RFIs, or requests for information. And our website is really the best way to find out what's going on in human services. And it's being updated now, but it also contains some specific examples of efforts that we fund. And I think that's it for my time. I hope I didn't go over. I'm going to pass to Sam.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Kiyomi. I use he, him, or they, them, or any pronouns are fine with me. Let's see, I'm in an office and my background is completely white and gray. Today I'm looking a little bit casual. Today I got a black hoodie on and I have long, dark brown hair that's tied up into a top bun with a little ponytail, which is pretty commonplace for me. I am Hapa. I'm half Japanese, half white, and I'm a program officer on our Kresge's Detroit team. So Detroit being the hometown of Kresge, we have a dedicated program and strategy to this place, to our city. And one big aspect of it is working with our colleagues in human services and education, in health, to help land their strategies in our places. So everything that you've heard from Bill and Gina and Stacy has a direct analog inside of Detroit and is very applicable. Generally, we also have more strategies and areas of work outside of that, and they all work in the service of the overarching mission, which is advancing justice, economic equity, quality of life, climate resilience for Detroiters in our neighborhoods. And we have a particularly strong focus on neighborhoods and community leadership across the city. So there is a ton of different strategy areas and areas of work that I don't think I'll have time to go through every single aspect today, but I will give a brief high-level overview and then of course welcome questions at the end. We support work around community organizing and movement building in service of racial justice across the city. This also includes supporting community violence intervention and ways that neighborhoods can control and own the safety inside of their spaces. We work with our health team as well as our social investments team to create affordable, equitable housing across the city, but particularly in the North End neighborhood, Jeff Chalmers in Southwest Detroit, and in Live 6, Livermore, Nichols areas of Detroit. We support creative placemaking in public space. This is community development organizations and arts organizations, driving culture as a way to keep and create space and place inside of neighborhoods. We support community development infrastructure, so community development organizations across the city that are supporting resident power. We work with them actively to lift up opportunities for that neighborhoods and residents create. And inside of this strategy bucket is our yearly open RFP process called KIPD. It's Kresge Innovative Projects in Detroit. And this is a yearly process that we have a participatory grant making process for it. And so Detroit residents make up a board of panelists that review these grants and then grant them out. The KIPD grants were just granted. And so our next round will be opening up in the fall of this year. And that's something to keep an eye out for as well. In addition to that, we're supporting health equity and environmental justice, trying to figure out how to make a more climate resilient city, addressing challenges with our water system and its environmental injustices. We have a strategy around child and family-centered neighborhoods. And this is about how we can get our education systems and our community development organizations and our childcare systems in alignment with one another in our key communities so that we can support and uplift our children. And it goes on and on and on. But I think that the best way to stay in touch is one with our website. We also have a Detroit specific newsletter. It will be I think the first or maybe the second will be dropping pretty soon. So you can find it and sign up for it on our website. And what's good about this too, not only does it help track the opportunities coming out of our team, but we also lift up opportunities coming up from our philanthropic partners and our intermediary partners around the city. Oftentimes, just because of the capacity constraints for our organization, we will make grants to or partner with organizations that are working more directly with communities and have more specific opportunities. This includes organizations like Transforming Power Fund and COACT and different opportunities that'll come from our partners that we support with as well. So it's something good to keep an eye out for. And let me stop rambling now, and I will turn it over, I think, back to Georgia. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you to everybody else, all the other speakers. And at this point, I want to open it up for the Q&A and ask that you put any questions that you may have into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everybody. And if it's easier for folks to raise their hand, I think you'll have access to the raise hand function, so you can raise your hand and I will unmute you if that's easier for you to ask your question.
And please let us know if you try to place a question in chat and it's not enabled. It should be, but if you are, please let it, and you've had difficulty doing that, please let us know.
Great, so our first question is, someone was just asking a clarifying question. Did they hear correctly that we do not fund direct service organizations?
Well, I will say for health, we do fund organizations that work directly with community. And that is not in all of our areas of work, but in most of our areas of work, we absolutely do fund direct service organizations.
I would say from a human services standpoint, we may have had some direct service entities that we support, but mostly we support organizations who are working towards policy change and systems change. So we do have some direct service organizations, but primarily that's not the bulk of our portfolio.
For education, we also rarely do direct service organizations. Where we do tend to do them would be in a focus state or in one of the Kresge focus cities. And occasionally, if there's an RFP, let's say there was a partnership, say, for example, between education, community colleges and human service agencies, that's where there might be some support for direct service agency, but usually it would not be an individual direct service entity that would get a grant from us.
Similarly, for the Detroit team, we do fund direct service organizations, but it's typically around their work to do power building or around policy change work or systems level work where they can more broadly make direct services easier. Less often do we fund direct services for the content of the services that they're providing.
Thank you all. So I'm going to ask another question from the Q&A. So the person asks, they want to know how committed we are to supporting trauma-informed and culturally competent organizations in the disability space and the mental health space. And just acknowledging that historically philanthropy as a system has failed to fund BIPOC-led organizations. So just how does your team address that?
So I'll start again. This is Stacy from the health program. I will say a couple of things. One is that most of our grants are now led by leaders of color and work directly in community. So that's first of all. Second of all, I think that I forgot the second thing I was going to say, sorry. But I will say that we absolutely are working with communities that are led by people from community and led by people of color. And in our, I remember, in our safety work, we are working closely with organizations who are doing trauma-informed care. And we are leading with that, with trauma-informed care in our work as well.
For the education team, I don't think we would say that we do a lot of active work on trauma, but we do support mental health services for students, which is a huge challenge. It was already a big issue before COVID, but really exploded during COVID. And then as far as the makeup of our grantees are divided into two very distinct groups. One would be colleges and universities, and the other group would be the nonprofits, typically serving to help people get into college or people doing research on post-secondary challenges. And we do have initiatives to support our grantees of color. In fact, we just had a dinner this week here in Chicago in our Thrive initiative, where we're trying to support and uplift our grantees of color to make sure that they can serve their organizations as well as they'd like to, and provide them with additional capacity building support, coaching, and other services that they've requested.
On the Human Services Program, we do center racial equity and racial justice, and we support organizations that are working towards structural changes and systems changes, policy changes, advocacy work toward those goals. And our partners, while we don't have an intentional focus on those with disabilities, there are several partners that I highlighted when we talked that do. So essentially, we would support organizations who would then provide support to some direct serving organizations that do support those with disabilities specifically.
Are we answering the question here that's posed in the chat around working disability justice? I just missed the question.
Oh, this question was in the Q&A section, and it's just about how we're making sure that, or how are we being committed to cultural competency and making sure that our work is trauma informed.
So I probably combine those questions just for the audience.
So for the Detroit team, I mean, I would just agree with fellow panelists here. Like, the priority is to support BIPOC leadership, particularly in Detroit, Black and Latino leadership as well, on the community level. We have also TA providers that are like working to support trauma-informed practices within our CDO groups as well in order to push this forward. In terms of working on disability justice, we have our community organizing and movement building support work in Detroit is going through a refresh and a revisiting moment this year in anticipation for 2024. And so our team has been kind of mulling through and working on an anti-oppression framework to animate and guide our work. And I think one of the primary principles for it is to center those who are at the margins and like center that leadership, those ideas, and cultivate that. So while we're still sort of in a fluffy, amorphous phase, the plan is to, within the next few months, get a very concrete and specific plan around how we're going to do that. Possible ideas are developing supporting cohorts of community organizations, working on disability justice in the city, and then also working with our movement partners as well to be able to center disability justice within their work. So it's a little bit of a TBA and a TBD in terms of how, but the process is rolling forward, and really excited about it.
Awesome. Thank you all for those very thoughtful answers. My next question, I think this is just going to be directed towards Bill. So how would your team like to work in the higher education disability space moving forward?
So one of the things that we do is we focus on access and success for students, and there are huge equity gaps within the post-secondary space in terms of enrollment and also in terms of degree completion or qualification completion. And one of the things we do is we try to focus on solutions designed to remove the friction that leads to students not succeeding in institutions. That typically is focused primarily on race, with a sort of secondary focus on gender, but we have at times focused on disability groups. Typically, the kind of groups that we funded in the past would be nationally oriented, sort of more at the policy level, rather than a specific group, say, working in a specific community. Where that doesn't happen, though, would be if there was, say, since we focus a lot in California as one of our focus states, and the 4 focus states I mentioned, California, Michigan, Florida, and Texas, that just applies to the education team. But we work a great deal in Los Angeles. So if there was a Los Angeles-based disability support organization for, say, college access, that's something we might take a second look at. But typically we'd be looking at national groups, and that's what we've funded in the past in the disability space. And so I wouldn't say that we're changing what we're doing. The door is open. It's just that these are the kind of groups we'd be looking towards.
Great, thank you. And you kind of touched on another question that was asked. Does an organization need to be in one of the preferred US states that we were mentioning before? So do the other teams want to answer like what specifically their program focuses on?
Sure. This is Stacy with the health team. I would say that at Kresge, we have both national and place-based teams, and sometimes a team has a combination of those. For the health program, we do fund nationally, and so we fund all states. We are particularly focused in those communities that may not have been that may not have had heavy philanthropy support in the past, in the South, Southwest, Southeast, as a matter of fact, in areas that are very low income, where people have been really not been able to receive resources. Our priority cities at Kresge are the city of Detroit, Fresno, New Orleans, and Memphis. And each of our teams also makes a concerted effort to fund organizations in those particular cities as well.
And I would say for the Human Services team, and this is Gina Lewis again, we, of course, pay attention to the focus cities of the foundation. But in addition to that, we also do work in Jackson, Mississippi, Baltimore. We do a few things in Puerto Rico. Place is important. However, strategy and alignment is probably more important, I would say, because we are a national funder. So it's not like if we get a proposal that, you know, aligns with our strategy and is in a place where maybe we haven't been before, we would certainly also look at that as well.
Awesome, thank you. So we have another question that was in the chat about how specifically are we trying to create intentionality with how we fund disability-led nonprofits, specifically people with disabilities that are leading these and working on disability justice.
So I think I touched on that a little bit earlier, kind of combining the questions, and was saying again, some of the highlighted partners that we talked about who do in fact emphasize and focus on disability supports. So that's one way in which it happens. But I also think it's important to say this is an introductory dialogue. And so part of it is learning what organizations do, what services they provide, and how they align with what we have as strategies and focus areas. So I'm hoping that, again, we be able to learn more actually about organizations that we may consider supporting or funding or even exploring. So I'm feeling like this is actually a beginning of that conversation in a lot of ways.
Sam, I think I saw you come off of mute. Is there anything you wanted to add, or did Gina pretty much cover it all?
I combined the answers as well.
Okay, cool.
You're referencing the anti-oppression framework and just echoing Gina as well. Like this is the beginning of the conversation, and we're like on the early stages of it within our team as well. And how we center like those who have been pushed to margins too has been like maybe the primary goal. Our goal is to figure out this year with our team, and they're hoping to make it concrete, real, and specific closer to the fall of this year when we have some way to support like a cohort of disability justice or disability-led groups, and supporting also those principles within our partner organizations as well.
Those are currently all the questions we have. So I would invite folks, if there are any other questions, we would be happy to answer them. Okay, so there are several organizations on this call who are focused on disability services, particularly workforce development, to promote economic mobility. Would health be the best fit for these type of providers? And is health only doing, or are they only accepting solicited or invited groups to submit a grant?
And Georgia, you asked that about health, right? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Yes.
So I would say that our work is focused on addressing the social determinants of health, such as housing and food systems. So we, to be quite frank, we do not currently have something directly related to supporting folks in the disability and disability justice community. We hope that we work in a very intersectional way. So all the organizations we work with, they're all working on different areas. Some are working in food systems, safety, et cetera. So we hope that work is touched on. But let me just say that I really appreciate what Sam and Gina said, is that we really do consider this a beginning conversation for our team as well. And we will certainly take back the information that we hear. The second thing is, yes, I'm sorry that we do not have any open opportunities at this point, but we know that it's really important to begin the dialogue and the relationship. And please know that folks can connect with me directly and ask any questions that you may have. And I'm happy to share anything that our team is doing or anything that might seem relevant to the work as well. I'm not sure I answered that as fully as I could have.
Thank you. And just, I guess, a follow-up question, just that I kind of came up with as I was listening to you answer. So their question was about workforce development. And I know today we don't have all of the program teams represented, and that there will be a second session with the other teams. I guess just off the top of your head, is there a team that you think maybe we should look out, or they should look out for, who focus on workforce development or economic development?
So, the education team is focused on getting people credentials, post-secondary credentials, which inevitably should lead to workforce and employment. And I know that our sister team, the human services team, also looks at these issues. So those would be two areas in which, if you're looking for social mobility, our theory of change, to use a common foundation term, is that if we can get more people credentials at an affordable price, that they will be people who can then get the kind of jobs that will support them and their family. So that would be sort of an area to look at. And as I said, we have at times funded organizations in the policy arena that are focused on this, but this is, as others have said, this is a beginning conversation to think about that. And we would be eager, and I'm fairly confident that the conference I'm attending today is about 2,200 delegates, and there are inevitably going to be some panels probably on disabilities and supporting people with disabilities.
I would say too, from human services point of view, workforce development is one of the areas where we've invested before, for sure. And again, it's more toward the idea of not just necessarily getting a job, but really removing barriers so that employment is available and possible for people, and regardless of their race in particular, regardless of their abilities. So I'd say human services probably is a spot where economic success is one of the driving factors, but we also, again, look at strategies that emphasize whole family structures as well as racial equity and racial justice.
Awesome, thank you. So we have another question. Do you support community-based leadership development that cuts across health, education, human services, and place-specific work?
Just to understand, this is Sam again. Just to understand the question, by cuts across, do you mean something that is worked on all collectively between all of our programs, or are there discrete leadership opportunities for each different program? And sorry, I know that there's not a way for attendees to unmute themselves, so but maybe Georgia, you could, or Mark.
They did the first thing.
Oh, the first.
So the first thing you said. So yeah, that cuts across.
Yeah, I think the question, I interpret it as a sort of cross-sectional leadership. But I think it would be interesting also to answer it, because I know, for example, human services is working on Next Gen, has a leadership component. The health team has a leadership effort. So it might be helpful to share, to revisit those and share that.
I'll add to, I mentioned our Thrive program, which is designed specifically for our grantees of color to develop their leadership skills. We've also supported, this may not be quite as broad, but it seems broad to us because we focus on post-secondary education. We've supported Black leadership development in the East Bay in education, which I think has included post-secondary, but also maybe some K through 12. So we've done sort of very specific to our grantees and also some regional work on leadership focused on BIPOC leaders.
And we also in Human Services have a couple of grantees who support leaders of color primarily is where we've landed in that space with regard to leadership development. And also the next gen cohort, which is cross-sector. It would be leaders in human services, but across a lot of those areas because they all intersect. I mean, that is actually the truth. I know we're speaking for our particular slice of the pie at Kresge, but most of our work really dovetails because that's how society is. There's just not one issue people or one issue communities. It's actually a lot of intersectionality. So I wanted to point that out. And I also saw a question about the best way to contact Human Services. So I didn't know if we were going to share just email addresses out for everybody here on the panel. I'm fine to do that. And I can just list that in the chat.
Yes, that would be great. And I feel like maybe other people would probably have the same question. So this person was asking with the solicitation process, is there a way that you can send your organization's name, information, et cetera, for potential consideration? So I believe some folks are going to drop, or our panelists will drop their emails in the chat if they feel comfortable with it. I'm sure, not to speak for them, but I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions.
I would just say if you send something, say to my team, if you have had a chance to read our website and see that there's some overlapping interest between what our strategy and what you're doing, what you might want to do is send a relatively brief letter, email, I should say, that sort of introduces your organization, what it does, the problem that you're addressing, and then what you were hoping to get to address the problem. And we typically ask about 4 or 5 questions. One, does this applicant or this LOI have, does it fit our strategy? Does it address racial inequities in a systemic way? Is it scalable? Is it sustainable after our grant? And is it replicable? So if you ask those questions of what you're doing and what you're hoping to get support for, and you find that you're answering yes, or pretty much yes to everything, that would be probably a good way to do that. Because we wouldn't want you to waste time if you're really looking at a very different kind of thing. We wouldn't, for example, help with a K through 12 grant. That's just not what we do. We do post-secondary work. But that's something that's often useful, just to sort of ask yourselves of what you're doing and then submit that information, and we can take a look, and in a month or 2, we might get back to you with, either good news or disappointing news, but at least we can give you an answer.
Thank you for that, Bill. I think that applies probably for all of our programs. There is a lot of information on the website. And so taking a look at the kind of things we've supported before, as well as our strategies in detail. I know we just gave a brief overview and it was a lot of information in a short period of time, but really digesting that and looking at possible opportunities or intersections with our work would be, I think, a really good first step.
And I just wanted to note that in the chat, I've dropped the link to sign up for our newsletter, which is a great way to keep up with everything that's going on with Kresge. And I want to say, I know Sam and Bill have both dropped in some reminders to subscribe to their specific newsletter, but y'all's message went to the host and panelists. So if you want to resend that to everybody, I think everyone would appreciate that. So thank you. But I also wanted to give our panelists just a final few minutes to do a quick round robin. Was there anything that you think that would have been a good question to ask, or anything that you want to expand on, or just any closing thoughts for each of you?
Well, I think I said it before, but I'll reiterate that I'm really glad to have this interface and this introductory meeting with the organizations present. It dawns on us when we were really preparing that there's a lot of organizations that we just do not know a lot about at all. And so hopefully giving you some information about what we do, what kind of strategies we support, will, if they align with what you're doing, start a real conversation and further relationships in this space. So I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you, Georgia and Phyllis, for including me. And I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. It's one of the hard parts about working in a foundation is how to cultivate like meaningful connections and keep your pulse on what's happening in the world, just because there's so many different things coming at you and you're so at this sort of working at this different level that you're not used to. And so even though this conversation is a little bit one directional, I really hope that it's the start of dialogue too. And I really do invite folks to email me, for Detroiters, especially Michiganders, or anybody, and to start dialogue. It would be really exciting for me. So thank you so much for putting this on, Jordan.
And I want to thank Georgia and Phyllis for setting this up, but also all of you and all the great work that you do every day. Again, as a parent of a person with a neurological disability, I am very grateful for the services that you provide every day for people like my daughter.
Yeah, I believe Stacy had to drop off. She's in Hawaii on a site visit. But on her behalf, I just want to say thank you all for joining us. And I know she will be open, and if any of us who are open to hearing your questions or further questions or comments. So thank you for being here. Georgia?
Awesome. And so I just want to thank all of the panelists for taking the time to come on here and share a little bit more about your team and your different goals and priorities. I really appreciate y'all. I want to thank our amazing interpreters. Thank you so much for all the great work you have done to provide access. And I also want to thank everybody in the audience that was able to come today. I hope that this can really start some meaningful conversations and meaningful relationships between your organization and Kresge. And as I said before, please subscribe to our newsletter, because that's the best way to keep up with what's going on with us. And folks have put their emails into the chat, so feel free to ask any questions. And this webinar has been recorded and it will be posted within the next week or so. So if you need any reminders of what was said, that will be there for your reference. And look out for our second session, which will include the remainder of our program teams. It'll be kind of the same setup. The teams will give a presentation and then answer questions at the end. So yes, I wanted to thank you all so much. And yes, please share the recording with your colleagues. We want to make sure that this reaches as many people that are doing the great work in the disability field as possible. So with that, thank you all so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.